So here you can see some of the themes and issues which are recurrent in Harjo's poetry and which we can look out for in the poem Running. The autobiographical elements, which we've already mentioned, but which we can look into in more depth, but also references to her ancestry, references to the natural world. Is the poem about survival? I think certainly, yes, it is. Does she speak about language? We can have a look for that. And the idea that this act of writing a poem is going to help her to transform a memory which is perhaps negative or harmful into something which you can deal with. So let's have a look how those play out in the poem Running. First of all, the references to the natural world. In particular, I find powerful the metaphor regarding her loneliness and her lack of support being compared here to having a river to cross and no boat to use to get to the other side. I also really appreciate this description of darkness. I was afraid of the dark because then I could see everything. The paradox that in the dark the truth comes out, the truth about her life. And the moon described as being a moon with teeth, the mouth of the dark, the hiss and the snap, those noises which are so menacing and so full of elements of danger. And then she uses a beautiful synesthesia. I could hear my heart hurting. In the dark, all her vulnerability and her sense of the bad decisions she's made in her life to put her in the situation that she is in now, the things that have gone wrong with her past, leaving her with an aching heart. She's listening to them with her in the dark ears, those special ears that we have in the darkness, which help us to listen more acutely, to hone in on all those little signals which are more to do with instinct than to do with sort of reflection. And finally, of course, when she becomes the wind at the end of the poem, she breaks free, she flings herself free of the cross, the burden of her history and of her present life, and she becomes the wind as she runs down the street. There is also a reference to language. It's here where she says, I wonder this sad world we've made with the enemy's words. The enemy's words are English, the language of the enemy. And the fact that she is forced to use that language because it is the language in which she is fluent to express herself through poetry, but that this imposition makes it a sad world. In terms of autobiography, if you look at this reference here into the dark street of this old Indian town where there are no Indians anymore, if I take that, and I'm of course interpreting this for myself based on what I've learned from her biography, if I take this as a reference to Santa Fe, a town which was originally, or a settlement originally founded by Native American people, but which is now 79% white, 2% Native American, then we can place the experience, the boyfriend, the bar, at a time in her life when she was at the Santa Fe Institute of American Indian Arts, and when indeed she did have a boyfriend, an abusive boyfriend. She is probably not much more than 16. I'm thinking about this because of the fact that she refers to that she has no home at all. Her father has gone, and she has been chased out of her home by the stepfather's gun. These are all events from Harjo's life. her father, the breakup of the marriage because her father drank and became violent when he drank. Her father is succeeded in the house by the stepfather, who is manipulative and controlling, abusive. And at the age of 16, after Harjo has become rebellious and has started drinking herself, her stepfather kicks her out of the house at gunpoint. She's remembering that. And as you can see, her mother is not mentioned at all. At this point in her life, her mother has not provided the support she needs. She's under the control of this abusive second relationship, and is providing at that time no support for her daughter. And continuing the spiral of abuse, Harjo has entered into this relationship with her boyfriend, who is convincing, who is the spell of attraction, obviously a powerful personality too, but equally abusive. And in the fog, and in the smoke-filled bar, the smell of alcohol, the sense of fear and violence brings back the memory of her father, Harjo's father, who, as we said before, suffered from alcoholism. So other references here, when she is punched by her boyfriend, it recalls that abusive relationship. And here, as she comes out of that moment of what seems total defeat, she stands up again and she thinks about her ancestry. She thinks about the ancestors, the old ones, who are always there, and the fact that she is the daughter of a warrior. Rather than the daughter of a warrior, she's the great-granddaughter of a warrior. Her great-grandfather, who was a warrior Indian. And that part of her past comes to the forefront in that moment when she needs to become strong and break free. A poem about survival? Definitely. I've underlined two particular parts of the poem which show this instinct for survival, this desire to break free of what might pull her down. The success that she's going to make of her life when she finally, after another abusive relationship, after later on from the one that is referred to in this poem, she does take her life into her hands, begins university, and starts to make sense of her life. But here in the poem, survival, I went down, then came up. I went down after the thump, after the punch, I went down. But immediately you can see that the reaction is immediate, then came up. And from that moment on in the poem, we are talking about strength. We are talking about the desire to be free of the burdens of history, the burdens of her present life, breaking free. And she says, I was anything but history. I'm not beaten. I'm going to detach myself from all that is negative about my history and become the wind. She chose the name Harjo once she had managed to break free of that second abusive relationship that I mentioned. She chose it for herself. She took it from her grandmother. It's a name which means courage. And she adopts that name when she goes to university, becoming in her own right the wind which she can already foresee she is going to become in this poem. If I take the line from the poem, which is, it's been a century since we left home with the American soldiers at our backs. This poem, although it only mentions it briefly, would be an ideal opportunity to explore the Trail of Tears, which she's obviously referring to in that line from the poem. It becomes a push for us to investigate and remind ourselves of the horrific events of the 1800s in the US, when the greed for land and the greed for gold of settlers meant that over 10,000 First People died. 5 entire nations of First People were marched at gunpoint west of the Mississippi and onto Oklahoma. The Muskogee Nation, to which Harjo belongs, also referred to as the Creek Nation, and as you can see, over 3,500 Creeks died on the journey west. So, a final reading of the poem Running before we move on to our second poet. It's closing time. Violence is my boyfriend with a cross to bear, hoisted on by the church. He wears it everywhere. There are no female deities in the Trinity. I don't know how I'm going to get out of here, said the flying fish to the tree. Last call. We've had it with history. We who look for vision here in the Indian and Poetry Bar, somewhere to the left of hell. Now I have to find my way when there's a river to cross and no boat to get me there, when there appears to be no home at all. My father, gone. Chased by the stepfather's gun. Get out of here. I found my father at the bar, his ghost at least, some piece of him in this sorry place. The boyfriend's convincing to a crowd. Right now he's the spell of attraction. What tales he tells. In the fog of thin hope, I wonder this sad world we've made with the enemy's words. The lights quiver, like they do when the power's dwindling to a dangling string. It's time to go home. We're herded like stoned cattle, like children for the bombing drill, out the door into the dark street of this old Indian town, where there are no Indians anymore. I was afraid of the dark, because then I could see everything, the truth with its eyes staring back at me, the mouth of the dark with its shiny moon teeth. No words, just a hiss and a snap. I could hear my heart hurting with my in-the-dark ears. I thought I could take it. Where was the party? It's been a century since we left home with the American soldiers at our backs. The party had long started up in the parking lot. He flew through the dark, broke my stride with a punch. I went down, then came up. I thought I could take being a girl with her heart in her arms. I carried it for justice, for the rights of all Indians. We all had that cross to bear. Those old ones followed me. The quiet girl with the long dark hair, the daughter of a warrior who wouldn't give up. I wasn't ready yet to fling free the cross. I ran and I ran through the 2 a.m. streets. It was my way of breaking free. I was anything but history. I was the wind.